This is a DC Bar Brief Encounters podcast. I'm Don Resnikoff of the DC Bar's antitrust and consumer law community. Today's topic concerns what is called right to repair, and we're going to talk about right to repair laws. Right to repair law guarantees access to parts, tools, and service information for consumer electronics and general consumer goods. DC does not have such a comprehensive right to repair law. What DC does have is a consumer protections law referred to as the Consumer Protections Procedures Act. And DC may have some limited product-specific laws, such as an implied warranty statute for particular technology devices. But DC does not have a right to repair law of the kind U.S. PIRG advocates. That is the U.S. Public Interest Research Group. Our speaker today is Isaac Bowers. Isaac is the Federal Legislative Director for U.S. PIRG. He is a graduate of the New York University School of Law, and coincidentally, so am I. Although in my day, the school operated out of rented loft space, Canal Street. The school became much more elegant after that. In any event, in Isaac's work at U.S. PIRG, he collaborates with U.S. PIRG advocacy staff and federal agencies, partner organizations, coalitions, congressional staff of both parties, and other stakeholders to advance PIRG's policy goals. PIRG is an advocate for consumers, advancing solutions to problems that affect our health, our safety, and well-being. And thank you, Isaac, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, let's start with a very simple question, and that is, what is right to repair, as you use the term?
Well, thanks, Don. I think your summation was pretty good, but I would just put it in even more simple terms, really. Right to repair is the really common sense idea that if you own something, you should be able to fix it yourself. And you should be able to take it to any third-party repair shop or back to the manufacturer to have it repaired. This is important for a couple of reasons, but I want to start at the top with the idea that repair is like a core American value. At heart, we're a nation of tinkerers and fixers and repairers. This is really embedded in the American ideal from the frontier days on. And so it's as much a social movement and a movement about autonomy and freedom to do what we want and we see fit with the items we own as anything else. And then second, on kind of a consumer perspective, when we allow companies to monopolize repair, prices tend to go up for consumers and the availability of repair often goes down. And as a corollary, when there's an open and competitive repair market, prices tend to go down and availability tends to go up. And we're living in a time when, unfortunately, manufacturers are increasingly finding ways to restrict our ability to repair our own stuff. So the right to repair movement is ultimately about restoring that individual autonomy and ability to repair our own things and creating a competitive repair market where you have the ability to do that.
I'm going to ask you to offer us some examples that the audience might recognize. For example, is my cell phone and the battery in it possibly an example, or if not, what would be an example of a right to repair issue that someone like myself would come across?
Yeah, the cell phone is a great example that many people encounter. It would be great if in every time your cell phone battery went out, you could just take it to your local repair shop, get the battery swapped out quickly and efficiently and cheaply in a competitive repair market. But lots of companies restrict the ability to do that. So you have to take your cell phone to an authorized dealer or the manufacturer itself, have that done at inflated prices. It costs you more time, more money, instead of having it done quickly, cheaply, and efficiently. And I think cell phones are a great example as well, because one of the things that we see manufacturers do as they monopolize repair is they work to get the price point of that repair up to the point where it's like, if it's going to cost me that amount to fix it, I might as well buy the new one. And I think many, many people in America have had that exact same thing with the cell phone, where it's like, well, if it's going to cost me this much to repair, I'll just throw it away, maybe recycle it and get a new one. And the end result is that Americans throw away or dispose of 416,000 cell phones every day. I always find this an incredibly startling statistic, but it's just one of the reasons that electronic waste, e-waste, is one of the fastest growing and most toxic waste streams here in the US and across the world. Is we're being forced to take these perfectly good devices and dispose of them because it's more efficient to do so instead of repairing it ourselves or having somebody else do it.
I had exactly that experience where I had difficulty replacing the battery, and it was so complicated and expensive, just as you said, to replace the battery that I ended up buying a new one. It made me an unhappy consumer if that happened.
Yeah.
Moving on, though, yeah, I think you've already made the case for allowing a right to repair. Can you tell us what you think the state of play is about advocacy of the right to repair solution?
Yeah, I think I would just add one thing, Don, to the case I made before for breaking down repair monopolies and empowering consumers and third party repairers is that, you know, sometimes I think we think of these as like minor amounts of money or delays that are mere inconveniences. And certainly for you, I'm sure when you had to, throw away your old cell phone and get a new one, it was annoying. But at US PIRG, we've talked to people like farmers who want to repair their tractors and are not able to do so. And it costs them weeks of downtime while their tractors sit at a dealership. And it costs them tens of thousands of dollars at critical junctures in their growing season. We've talked to people who are handicapped and have powered wheelchairs, and those wheelchairs go down and they're stuck for weeks without being able to move, which is, both debilitating to their own independence and their lifestyle, and sometimes like really threatening to their health. And we've talked to Army techs who have been responsible for on the front lines in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, keeping essential health equipment like CT scanners and MRIs going, and have been unable to do so or have had great difficulty doing so because of repair restrictions, something that could ultimately cost soldiers their lives when they get wounded on the battlefield. So I just like to put this context in, there's like the individual consumer, those of us for whom this is an inconvenience and we would prefer to save money and keep our things and not dispose of them and have those environmental benefits. But there's many, many places in the US economy where these are really big deals and not just inconveniences.
I'd like you to say a word or two about what a statute would look like in DC or other states that don't yet have such laws. And as you provide a brief outline, I assume you have materials that you could suggest people look at if they want to know more about specific language that might go into a remedial statute.
Yeah. Let me talk a little bit about the state of play, which I think you'd asked about earlier, and then we'll talk about DC and what that might look like. I would describe the state of play for the right to repair movement as we've moved from can this happen to it is happening. All 50 states have at least introduced a right to repair law in their legislature. Roughly a third of Americans now live in states with right to repair laws on consumer products. 9 states, ranging from California to Texas, have passed significant right to repair laws. So I think it's pretty clear. This is like a bipartisan, common sense reform that resonates widely with people and with legislatures. And I'll add that, we're taking that momentum. This is part of my job that has been created on the state level to Congress. And we're working on significant bills on military right to repair, amending copyright law, agricultural right to repair, wheelchair repair, automobile telematics, and more. And it's really exciting for me to see members of Congress get excited when they see that state momentum. So when I first started this job, I was talking to the staff of a prominent Midwestern Democratic senator, and their staff was like, hey, Senator was just at this bill signing for a right to repair law. They're incredibly excited about the chance to take that state momentum and build on it in Congress because they just saw how popular this was. And so that's, one reason that I think that DC should have a right to repair law. It's our nation's capital. It's a place where lawmakers pay attention. DC is an influential place in and of itself. And we would love to see DC be part of this growing movement to create right to repair for all Americans. And I would also say for DC policymakers, it's just a good policy. It will save district residents money. It will support small businesses that engage in repair. There's one right near me in Cleveland Park where I live. There's one over here in Eastern Market. Small businesses will benefit from enhanced ability to repair because they will be able to repair more things more of the time for more people. So it will help grow businesses in DC. And, just to touch on the cultural aspect a bit, it's empowering for people to be able to fix their own stuff. It's meaningful to be able to keep things for a long time, know that you're not contributing to electronic waste and just disposing of things in this kind of throwaway culture, but be able to, keep things, repair them, maybe even pass them down to your friends or your family members. So I think both on the policy side and just, DC's position as a leader and as the nation's capital, we should work on having a right to repair law here.
Thank you. So you mentioned something about the U.S. military. Could you say a little bit more about that? That's quite an interesting situation, I think.
Yeah, really interesting. So it turns out that over the last couple of decades, the Department of Defense has slowly given away the rights it needs to repair its own weapon systems and equipments. These giveaways include contractual provisions to defense contractors that allow them to void warranties if service members repair their own equipment, and others that allow contractors to retain the full intellectual property rights and technical data necessary for repair, allowing those contractors to monopolize repair, just as we see in the civilian sector. Three big problems with this. One, it's causing skyrocketing sustainment costs and wasting hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money when the US military, instead of being able to fix its own stuff, has to go to contractors to do this. One example, the Navy is literally flying contractors out to the Indo-Pacific to repair littoral-class destroyers at the cost of millions of dollars because they can't do the work themselves. And, again, as we see in the private sector, and as Thomas Ayers, who's the general counsel of the U.S. Air Force, has noted, reliance on these single companies for long-term repair and sustainment doesn't allow the DoD to unleash the creativity of small businesses, startups, and others who have historically been locked out of contributing innovative ideas to defense programs. And that's a direct quote from a op-ed that General Counsel of the U.S. Air Force wrote a little while ago. So, one huge ongoing cost to the American taxpayer and waste of funds because of this repair stuff. Two, contractors' repair restrictions are degrading military readiness. And this happens in two ways. One, again, as I was noting in the civilian sector, if you rely on companies for repair, you will often get delays in repair. And the GAO, for example, has reported that fighter pilots are not getting all the training they need because their planes are so often down and can't be flown that they're not getting the actual flight time they need to train. But also, service members need to know how to fix their own equipment if they're going to be in a constrained environment. There was a 2019 article or op-ed in the New York Times from Captain Ellie Ekman discussing this. She was involved in a joint US-Korean training mission. The generator broke, and she was shocked that her can-do Marines were like, sorry, ma'am, we can't fix this generator because it would void the warranty. And as she noted, the opportunity to practice skills in training that might be needed on the battlefield is essential. And that's the third point I would make, is that if we allow these repair restrictions to remain in place, inevitably it's going to cost lives in a battlefield or in a constrained environment. We just can't allow repair restrictions to become something where it could cause the death of US service members. So not to go on too long, but I would say that not surprisingly, there's broad support for right to repair in the armed services and the general public. the Army, the Navy, the Air Force secretaries have all expressed support for right to repair. The Army is already putting right to repair into effect under terms of a memorandum from the Secretary of Defense. The Army Secretary Dan Driscoll has said that it is sinful and demoralizing for troops to see tens of thousands of dollars of equipment lying around bases that they could fix with a 3D printer, but they're not allowed to touch. The Trump administration has said that repair provisions are one of their main priorities for the upcoming FY26 National Defense Authorization Act. And US PIRG has done polling that shows that 74% of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, independents, all agree that the military should be able to repair its own gear. So we're really proud at US PIRG to have been working with bipartisan groups of senators and representatives on a bill called the Warrior Right to Repair Act of 2025, and to insert right to repair provisions in both the Senate National Defense Authorization Act and the House National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2026. Those bills have passed the House and the Senate. They're now part of a conference committee, and we're urging the House and Senate Armed Services Committee leadership to keep those right to repair provisions in place because it's essential for our armed services.
Well, that sounds like progress. I will say that I'm a little surprised to hear that the right to repair issue extends to things like destroyers and major aircraft, as opposed to just, more gadgety type things. That seems to make it quite a big deal. That's interesting.
It's across the spectrum for sure. Smaller items, wireless routers and stuff like that, but it's big ticket items as well.
I was going to ask you to move on to a topic you mentioned to me, which has to do with copyright, right to repair. And can you explain that and tell us something about it?
Sure. Yeah, I would love to. So let's go back in time a little bit to like the 1990s when things were first starting to be digitized and you had things like DVDs and CDs. You may remember, Don, that at that time, companies like Napster were ripping the data out of these DVDs and CDs, and people could download the information on BitTorrents and other things. So in response, in 1998, Congress passed the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And this created a Section 1201 of the Copyright Act that basically said it's illegal to break a technological protection measure, is what they call it, but basically a digital lock that protects copyrighted materials. And importantly, it's also illegal to traffic in to create and sell a tool that allows people to break such digital locks. Well, fast forward to today, and almost everything is digital, right? We live now on the Internet of Things, where you have cell phones and laptops, but everyday appliances like toaster ovens and fridges may be connected to the Internet. And manufacturers are taking advantage of that to embed repair functions behind technological protection measures, making it a copyright violation for you to fix your own stuff. You can't access this, say, copyrighted software code that's behind a digital lock, even if it's a simple one, without violating copyright law. And again, importantly, it's also illegal for independent companies to make tools that would allow consumers to repair their own stuff, because you can't traffic in tools that do that. So let me give you like an example of how this might work out. One of the companies that's taken a lot of advantage of this is John Deere. Tractors these days are up to $500,000 machines that are basically big computers on wheels. And to fix them, you need to integrate any new parts or any changes you made with the digital systems that control it. And they've locked those down so that it's, a copyright violation to go in and fix that for farmers. So when we talk about, as I was mentioning earlier, farmers who have to go to the dealer to get a repair done and can have their tractor there for 3 weeks or a month in the middle of the time they should be planting crops, and it costs them tens of thousands of dollars, this is why. And John Deere has slowly, after years of activism, created consumer-facing tools that will, with limitations, allow people to fix things, but they're not complete, and it costs farmers money per machine to do this. Now, you can imagine a different world in which companies are allowed to manufacture or repair tools for consumers to use, for farmers to use, who are can-do people who want to do it, where that pricing would be determined based on the marketplace. And a farmer could choose. They could say, I'm going to buy this tool and I'm going to fix stuff myself. I'm going to go back to John Deere or their authorized dealer because I prefer that and I think it's more safe. Or I'll go to a third-party mechanic and come right out to my field and who's bought this tool and can fix my tractor for me. Farmers could have the flexibility to do what's best for them, to save the money and to get on with their job, which is planting and harvesting crops, not sitting around in repair shops. So we're advocating for a limited exception to Section 1201. It would allow consumers access to copyrighted materials for purposes of repair, and it would allow companies to create tools that access these digital locks and this information for repair purposes. We have a prominent Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee who we think will drop this bill soon. We have a lot of interest on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we think this is a really common sense provision that will just fix a problem that Congress could not have foreseen way back in 1998 and create a whole new, open, competitive, thriving repair market in places where it's been foreclosed.
I take it this would also apply to more homely type devices like the refrigerators with a digital component to them, or your home heating system that you can access remotely, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. The auto repair market is not perfect and it has a lot of the same problems we have, but I think it's a good example of where we could see both the consumer market going and then specialized markets like the John Deere tractor market and the farmers markets where, like you kind of take it for granted. You buy a car, you can fix it yourself, you can bring it to the repair shop around the corner, you can go to an authorized dealer. If there's a specialized tool that you need, chances are you can go to AutoZone or someplace and just buy the tool you need at a competitive, fair, reasonable rate. We could have that same kind of vibrant repair ecosystem for so many other things if we just fix this mistake that was made in Section 1201. And I don't even want to say it was a mistake. It was just like inability to read the future and realize that soon everything would be connected to the internet. Everything would have a digital component, and that manufacturers would be able to take advantage of this provision to clamp down on repair.
So as we come close to the end of our program here, you've given us examples where U.S. PIRG has had some pretty good advocacy successes. But looking to the future, what kind of things will U.S. PIRG be asking state and federal policymakers to do in the future?
Yeah, well, I think the first is pass new state and federal laws. I think you gave a good summation of our basic, legislative text, which is just requiring companies to ensure access to the parts, the tools, the information that consumers and others need to effectuate repair at fair market prices. We're not asking people to give stuff away, but if you provide tools and information at a price to a dealer or an authorized retailer, you should provide it at the same price to consumers and third-party repair shops. There's special roles. Obviously, when I talk about military right to repair and copyright right to repair, these are things where states don't have jurisdiction. The federal government does. So there's a special role, I think, for the federal government in doing these things. And then the second thing is enforcing the right to repair laws that are now on the books. Like I said, about a third of Americans are now in states with right to repair laws. We write an annual report called Leaders and Laggards that show gaps where companies are not complying with the law, that we would encourage attorneys general and others in charge of enforcing state laws to look at and make sure that, these laws are only as good as the enforcement of them and the compliance with them. So we'd like to see that. And then the last thing I would say again is just, it would be great if we could work here in DC to be a leader on this issue as well. I think it's a place of unique influence for both federal policymakers and among states. And these right to repair laws are broadly popular. I think people who live in the district like me would appreciate it. I think it would be good for the district. I think it would be good for the right to repair movement to have DC on board.
Thank you. I really appreciate having helped us with this very interesting advocacy story. And when I say that, I say it with recognition that there are probably advocates on the opposite side that might have something to say, and they can in the future. We're not restricted in any way. But it's a great story, and I appreciate your being with us today and sharing it with us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Don. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It's work I care about and always happy to chat anytime.
Great. Thank you very much.